Dear guests, good afternoon. Let me first introduce myself. I'm Kristina Zabolotskaya, the CEO of School of C. And we really appreciate that you were able to attend our meeting on Zoom here and live stream on Facebook. Let me remind you that you can ask any questions during the presentation. Please do that in the comments section. I'd like to begin with introducing our coach, Lisa Patti, the founder of C Free Speech. She's also a professor and a curator of C-level program in our School of C. So Lisa, could you please begin with the topic of today's very special masterclass, connecting your voice with your story? It sounds really intriguing. And tell us about a few words about our program.
Sure. So thank you very much. I appreciate that introduction. And welcome everyone to the School of C Masterclass. So first I'm going to introduce a little bit about School of C. Then I'm going to go into the presentation and we will keep an eye on the time. So we're hoping that we have about 45 minutes of presentation and 15 minutes of questions, but I will be asking you questions throughout the presentation, and I would encourage you to either type in the chat or answer, or we could even have people unmute. And if you could possibly help me out with, letting me know if there's anybody in the chat, that would be great. If I miss any questions, and I'll just make sure I have my phone handy here too. So let me see if I have everything here. Okay. All right. So, and can you introduce yourself as well, just so everybody knows who you are as well? Got it. Yeah.
Anna, may you start?
Okay. And what's your role?
Okay. I'm Anna. I'm program manager at C School.
Okay. Program manager.
Is it enough, or should I tell about my experience and so on?
I think just so everybody gets to know who's on the call, and if they have questions for us. So we have Anna. We have who else is on the call? Do I have how many other of us is on this call from School of C?
Ivan from School of C. Alina. Product manager.
Yes, hello. I am the product manager of School of C, and I'm really happy to join this masterclass.
All right, thank you.
That's it. And our students. So maybe Ivan, will you welcome us?
Yeah, hi, Lisa and everyone. My name is Ivan Lunyagov, and I've just applied for the School of C. So, and just sign up the contract. So the agreement, yeah, correct. And so Christina just invited me for this meeting. And yeah, I really appreciate this meeting.
All right, thank you. Yeah. Welcome. Could you enable, Christina, the screen sharing?
Yes, it is working.
It's working now? Okay. Great. No, it's a disabled participant screen sharing. So.
Oh, just 1 minute. I'm going to let you share the screen. Yes.
I know sometimes Zoom gets a little picky, so we never know what it's going to do. Okay. All right. So as we mentioned, we're going to introduce School of C. We're all in different parts of the world right now. I'm in New York City. I know we have people from all over the world. We have people from Russia. We have people from different parts of the globe. Here we go. Can you type in the chat where some of you are right now? Okay, we have a lot of people from Moscow right now. Most of us are from Moscow. So I think I'm the only one. In Miami, we have a Miami person. Moscow. All right, so I know it's pretty late for all of you in Moscow, and we'll get moving on our presentation. So let's talk a little bit first about School of C. School of C is a very different initiative. So I work also with Startup Ventures Accelerator, which is going to be a bit different. Startup Ventures Accelerator is early stage companies that are coming in. Usually it's young founders without a lot of experience, whereas our School of C students tend to be high-level professionals and IT professionals. They're executives in offline businesses. So a lot of our students in School of C were in enterprise companies. They were CEOs, they were managers, and now they're interested in getting into innovation and venture, and they want to learn more about it. So we're really not the typical business school, and we're not a startup accelerator. Like I said, we are something a little different. So our approach is very hands-on. So if you work with us, you will have direct mentorship, but you'll also be, able to take on different roles within a company. You'll be able to go through experiences as if you were developing a company, as if you were working with a high-level startup. So not only will you have hands-on approaches and direct mentorship, but you're going to be developing a network that will last you a lifetime. So just like when you go to your MBA, just like when you join a company, these networks are valuable, and you will be meeting with investors and mentors and colleagues that you will be able to build a network with, not only in Moscow, but abroad, and you'll build your global network so that you can launch your own startup at some point or be part of a global startup. You're also going to start thinking about working globally if you're not doing that already, and how you're going to work on a global team, communicate on a global team, communicate across cultures, and how that looks and how that feels. And again, possibly by taking on different roles within your company to really understand what it feels like to be in those roles. So you're going to also get to choose the learning path that works best for you, whether you're launching your own startup or you're working with fellow students on the ideas. The goal for a lot of you is going to be land a C-level position in an existing global startup, but some of you might be really wanting to start your own global startup. So these are going to be the choices for you. Now, we have certain advantages in our program, again, because it's hands-on and because you choose the path and you're designing the learning goals, you're going to get that hands-on experience without going into textbooks and case studies. You are going to study real life experiences and get to solve real life problems. Now, as I mentioned, I work with Startup Accelerator, and they have a vast portfolio. We're already in batch 12 of companies who are already doing very successful work, who are scaling up, and you'll have access to these companies. And if you're the right fit, you'll have access to working with these companies. So again, you're going to be joining these companies at a very C-level position. And these companies are a place where you can learn, you can use your skills to understand the startup landscape. You'll also have a chance to get funding from Startup Capital or LiveQuest for your startup. You could receive a scholarship for your education. So this is great for people who want to receive a little bit of funding to help them go through the program, up to 75%. And also this, like an accelerator, is going to jumpstart your career. So this is going to give you the connections. This is going to give you the experience in a much faster way, in a friendly and trustworthy environment, which is very important, that you have that ability to, have the trust to ask questions, to feel like you're in a safe space, to communicate the way you want to communicate, to learn. So again, this is an accelerated way of doing it so that you get to meet the right contacts and build the network that would probably take you a bit longer, much longer, if you were doing it on your own. Starta has a self-supporting venture ecosystem. And again, going back to the accelerator, we also have the accelerator, Startup Ventures, LiveQuest, and School of C all working together. This is actually an enormous network that you'll have access to of founders coming in and out, and the founders in the accelerator from all over the world. So again, it's very global. We have founders right now from Africa, Latin America, Eastern Europe. We have founders from Italy, and we have founders from Spain. So we actually have a very global network that you'll be able to tap into as you launch your career. So how does this work? Well, it's a 4-month program, and you're going to have a very clear network, a very clear timeline. So in the beginning, you're going to work with mentors. You're going to start as, so you're going to start building your brand, taking communication courses, pitching skills. You're going to learn all of this through, a CEO investor roadmap, finding your product market fit, building your MVP, thinking about marketing, sales, and fundraising, of course, networking, pitching, and sales. And you're going to get to then come to either New York, or we have a brand new office in Berlin, and you're going to get to go to the Berlin office and really work on these startups. But as you move up through the months, you're going to have very clear goals. You're going to go through a very specific curriculum for each topic. So what I encourage all of you to do is fill out the application and complete the selection process to join our class. And I really hope to see you at School of C. So now I'm going to switch decks. So if you could just give me a moment, I will pull up my deck and we'll talk a little bit about communication. Now, this is really not specific to startups, but just best practice for communication. And one of the things I do here at the Accelerator is I coach on communication for startups all around the world. My specialty is actually working with international startups. So why is that different? Well, we think about how you're delivering, how you use body language, facial expression, how you use your voice. Culturally, this could be very different. How you design a pitch, what you think is important and should be in that pitch, how you choose your words. Those are all things that are going to change from culture to culture. So my favorite thing is to take all that into account and help you launch in the US or when you're using English as a language of business. Now, I know many of you speak English as a second, third, fourth language, and all of the experience you've had is very important. What I usually tell people is, everything about your communication style makes you unique. So use it, use the accent, use the voice, use the body language, use your charm to stand out in a very, very busy space, in a very crowded space of startups, so that you can be unique. And we're going to think about some ways to do that right now. So I developed a method. It's called the C3 method, and it's basically communicating your method so you can so global audiences can understand what you're talking about. So that's making sure that you're using language that's easy to understand, maybe not so detailed unless you're talking to people within your own space, especially when you're speaking across cultures. You want to be careful that we're using language that, it makes it easy for your whole team. Thinking about how clear your speech is, your voice is, how powerful your voice is. Are you being perceived the way you want to be perceived? And also, what are your cultural beliefs about communication or your personal beliefs? We're going to explore some of that as well. So the goals for this workshop are to raise awareness to your own communication style, to use your voice to connect to what you say and how you say it, and thinking about your unique style to let your personality shine. So the first thing I want to ask you, and I'm going to ask you to type in the chat. Let me just ask Christina, are they able to unmute, or is it mostly we're just going to keep an eye on the chat?
Yes, able.
They can unmute as well? Okay,
Yeah.
great. All right, so if you'd like to unmute, I'll invite you to do that as well. But I want to know, what information does a voice give us? And I want you to think about this. It could be simple as male and female, but there's so many pieces of information that a voice gives us. When we listen to a voice, what does it tell you? I'm going to, all right. Mood, intention, yes.
For example, how confident the person is.
How confident, yes. So confidence comes through a voice very clearly. And some of my startups that I'm working with right now, some of the startups that I'm working with right now have a great story, but they so far haven't learned how to connect to it. And that's a big deal. Understanding that it's not just about the words you say, but it is very much about how you say it, how you deliver it. So that's actually something that we're going to talk quite a bit about today. So when you think about cultural styles, you think about voice, how you use your voice, how you believe voice should be used, whether it's loud or soft, whether you use a higher pitch, a lower pitch. the tone of your responses. This is a big one when you're answering Q&A, when you're thinking about delivering and talking about your startup, when you're even talking about yourself. I was actually on a call last night with an Australian government program, and it was very interesting because you would think, okay, the Australians and people in the US are going to speak the same language, it's going to be very similar. But where they actually had a little bit of struggle was they were saying that investors in the US were asking very direct questions at the end of a pitch, which actually I think made some of those founders feel a little more uncomfortable. So they were asking questions like, okay, who exactly are your competitors? Are you aware of this? Are you aware of that? And I think when some of the founders were answering, they felt a little defensive. So it just came out in their tone, that of course, yes, of course we know this. And when you do that, you have to be really careful how you're being perceived by the person that's asking the question, especially if you're asking them for money. So we want to think about that as well. And then also, what do you believe about connection? How do you think about forming those relationships, using your voice, but also, how long does it usually take? In the US, you're going to find people connect very quickly. They're going to open up very fast. Now, it's going to feel very superficial to a lot of Europeans, especially people from Russia, because this is a style that, people jump right into business. Sometimes they tell you facts that are a little more personal than you would expect, not deeply personal, but things that they'll, open up, be friendly, maybe talk about family, things like that. And for some people, that's a little uncomfortable. So, how relationships are formed, how long they take to be formed, how we communicate in those relationships are another thing that we're going to think about when you're pitching or presenting, especially in the US. Another thing you want to think about is how much energy you actually need. So when you think about connecting, you want to think about how much energy do you need to connect one-to-one. So, when I'm speaking to Christina or Anna or Alina, I'm speaking to them and the connection could be a little easier. I don't have to use as much energy if it's just, us on a call. Maybe I'll need a little more if I'm presenting to them and it's just the three of us or the four of us, but it's not going to be as much energy as if I'm pitching out. So you really want to think about how it changes, how the energy changes as you present from a small group to a larger group. Now, I see, you think this would be something that people do naturally, but it's not always the case. Depending on your own personal beliefs, your style, your industry, sometimes people use a very similar style one-to-one as they do a small group and a large group. So we have people pitching, and I'm actually at Starden now, so that's why I probably gestured behind me. But we have people pitching here who sometimes will engage the audience in a way that they're not using enough energy to connect with this audience that's sitting in front of them. Also online right now, it's really important that you realize without the body language and the cues, you actually have to engage with a little more energy through your voice. You're going to have to engage with a little more energy, even with body language, with your facial expressions, because you don't have those nuances to rely on. If you were sitting in front of me, our conversation would feel different. So the first way and the best way to get some energy pulled into your voice is using volume. Now, depending on how comfortable you are with volume, some people are very soft-spoken, and there is no right or wrong in this, but we want to know how to get a little louder when we need to, how to inject energy into our pitch when we need to do that. So the first thing I want you to think about is a 5-point scale. The first point would be a whisper. The fifth point would be yelling at a game. That's easy. So these are pretty easy because they're extreme. The second one, though, is possibly a little more quiet. And so this might be my one-to-one voice. If I'm leaning in and I'm talking to Alina and saying, oh yeah, did you see, we have all these wonderful participants on the program. And maybe I don't want everybody to hear that, but I'm using a softer voice. Then I go up to, let's say, so that's a 2. A 3 might be, okay, so I'm going to use a little more energy, maybe not as much as I would use in the big room, but this is my small group voice. I want to keep you engaged. I want to make sure if I'm online, I'm keeping you engaged, but I don't necessarily, need to be as big as if I was standing there and needing to give you a 4, which would be the pitch voice. Even sometimes when you're on a mic, you still can't get too quiet. I have founders, if they're using a mic, but it's still very soft. It's still not the easiest to hear them. It also sounds a little muffled. So you want to be aware, are you someone with a very soft voice naturally? Are you someone who drops, into something called vocal fry? So you're speaking with a voice that, you're really dropping in your pitch notes and your voice sounds a little crackly. Maybe you have a habit of dropping your voice at the end of a sentence. So I have a lot of people who work with me and they'll say, my name is Lisa and I'm the founder of C3 Speech. My name is Lisa, I'm the founder of C3 Speech. And it just trails off right at the end. That actually is very difficult to hear, and you lose energy, you lose a little power at the ends of your sentences because people don't understand all the words. It also looks less confident, like you're pulling back. So one of the ways to see, are you actually getting louder or softer, how you're speaking, is to record yourself. I would say, take one line. Hi, my name is Lisa, and I'm the founder of C3 Speech. Now, I want you to record it on a 2. Hi, my name is Lisa. I'm the founder of C3 Speech. Hi, my name is Lisa, and then on a 4. Hi, my name is Lisa. So a 2, a 3, and a 4. Take one line, listen to it, see if it sounds any different. If it does, great. You're actually varying your volume. If it doesn't, which for a lot of people it doesn't, then you have to play with, are you actually getting louder? What a lot of people do is this. Hi, my name is Lisa, and I'm the founder of C3 Speech. Hi, my name is Lisa, I'm the founder of C3. So the first word or two, they say really loud, and then they get soft. So we want to make sure, are you using all the energy that you need to use when you're speaking and engaging an audience? And remember, it's not the same as that conversation. You might be great at one-to-one conversation, but now we have to keep people's attention. And I think post-pandemic, this is even harder to do because I think we just lose people very, very fast now. Unfortunately, people pet the dog and play with their phone and they have all these things around them and they've gotten used to doing so many things at once. So we have to think about engaging. Another thing that we very often do not think about is connecting to your body. Now, people talk about breathing in speech, and that's very important, but our body is also a tool. So if I only use my voice from the neck up, it's going to sound a bit different. It's going to sound a bit more like this. It's a little pressed up. So one of the ways to feel like you have a rounder, deeper voice is actually projected into your chest. So if you do this exercise and you put your hand over your chest right now and you feel this, and it's going to feel a little silly, but try it. If you do this, ga, ga, and I want you to feel the vibration in your chest. Ga, ga, hi, my name is Lisa. Hi, hi. And you want to feel the vibration in your chest. If I'm doing this, I don't feel much vibration in my chest. I also have a thinner voice. It's much harder to get power, to have a round sounding voice. Now, some people really just, like I said, speak from the neck up. They forget they have a body. So we want to think about, are you engaging using the body? And are you getting all the volume, all the tone in that you can by just doing this simple trick and starting to think about projecting into the body, opening up the voice a little. This is also great if you tend to get really tight. So if you're someone who's a little nervous when you're speaking, this is a great trick to keep the voice a little bit more open, instead of maybe going like this and, getting really tight, especially when you're out of breath. It's very easy to get super tight in the throat. The next thing is it's what you say, and it's also how you say it. So going back to perception, how do you want to be perceived? Do you want to be perceived as confident? Do you want to be perceived as knowledgeable when you're up there? Friendly, warm, engaging, authoritative? It's up to you. Again, there's no right or wrong answer, but you have to get behind some of these words. You can have an amazing story, but if you can't connect to that story, if your words and your personality, are not quite matching, then it's going to be harder for the audience to engage with you and believe you. So we want to think about varying your pitch and volume. Now, what does this mean? So when you're pitching or presenting, you are going to emphasize keywords. You're going to, say, hi, my name is Lisa. So you want to put a little emphasis on Lisa by saying it a little louder and a slightly higher pitch. Sometimes you could even stretch out the word. Hi, my name is Lisa, and I'm the founder of C3 Speech. So emphasizing keywords, saying them slower, saying them in a slightly higher pitch, varying what you say in volume and in pitch will keep someone's brain from saying, okay, I can predict this pattern. Either they sound very flat and I can predict that pattern, and now my brain is, doing something else because I know what they're going to say. Or maybe they're just using the same pattern over and over again, and then they get into this loop, and the brain does the same thing. What we want to do is trick the brain. We want to go faster, slower. We want to use a longer pause. We want to use a shorter pause. And we're going to talk about all those tools in your toolkit. The next thing you want to think about also, and this is tough when you're going from language to language, is very smooth transitions of words. So how words connect, how words flow together. Instead of it's what you say, instead of tapping each word, it's going to be a very smooth transition. It's what you say, it's what you say, it's how you say it. And those smooth transitions between words actually help the fluency, help the idea get delivered. The next thing we're going to talk about is how clear your speech is. Now, this could be for many, many reasons. It could be because you don't open your mouth very much. It could be you're not shaping the sounds. You're not saying the endings. One thing you want to make sure is that the words you're saying, the key words you're saying are clear. So how do you do this? Well, one of the ways you could do this is if you're prepping for a presentation at work, or even if you want to introduce yourself, you can look at what are the key words I'm saying, and are they clear? All the keywords that I say over and over again, my name, the name of my company, my title, the things I do, the words that are typical to my industry. Am I talking like this all the time? Where I keep my mouth closed like this? Am I opening my mouth enough? Am I actually spending enough time? Now in English, the vowels are where all the emotion live. If you hear me right now, when I emphasize a word, I open it up. I say the vowel very full. When you compare that to Russian, it's very different. Russian, the vowels are going to be shorter and more clipped. You don't need to spend as much time on them. You don't need to vary your voice. The music of Russian is different. And so when it translates over, you have to be careful that it doesn't come out too flat and it doesn't sound too short. You don't want the words to sound too quick because it's hard to understand them. It's almost like compressing the word. So you have to shape them. You have to make sure that you deliver. So before we get into fillers, I want to just pause for a moment and see if anybody has any questions or comments, or if they've experienced anything like this as they were pitching or presenting. Now, do you struggle with any of this? Have you ever, thought about volume? Have you ever, what was it like if you listened to a speaker who, you couldn't quite understand, or maybe they were too soft? So anyone has any comments on this? All right, so I'm going to move into fillers. This is one that, again, for second language speakers, fillers are those ums, uhs that people will sometimes use. Now, I actually was asking people, what are some of the fillers in their own languages? I got this for Russian. I'm not sure if anyone uses them or not, but you could let me know if these are correct. In English, I just did it. So these are those little moments we use to pause, but instead of pausing, we use a word or a sound. We do it in every language. And when you're speaking another language, when you're speaking a second language, kak. Okay, good. Thank you. So when you're speaking in other languages, it's really important for you to know that this is your moment to think of your next words. Now, what this could do, though, is distract a little bit. It's a way of thinking out loud. And again, when you're thinking of the vocabulary, when it's not all there, and you still have to search for some of the words, this is a really easy thing to do, but too many are going to become distracting. So we're going to talk about how to address this along with many other things. But one of the magic things that you're going to do in place of a filler is a pause, whether it's a longer pause or a shorter pause. Today, or when you're speaking very casual conversation, I want to challenge you to try to pause in place of those little sounds and fillers, whether it's in Russian or English, and see how easy it is to do. It's not so easy sometimes, especially if it's a habit of yours. So you want to think about, is this my habit? Do I use this more if I'm speaking in a second or a third language? And how can I pause to start changing my habit, to change that muscle memory, to change the way my go-to works where, I'm used to saying it this way, and now I have to change that. I usually tell people in the beginning, do it in very low stakes conversations, because you don't want to put yourself in a position where you're under stress, you're going to forget the words. And that's actually very important. So we've had founders here who try to use all of these tools when they're pitching, the next time they pitch. But now they're thinking about their voice and not thinking about the words. So if you're in any kind of high stakes conversation at work, I would say don't use this. Use this in casual conversation with a friend. Practice some of these things. One of the easiest ways to practice some of these techniques, whether you're emphasizing, whether you're putting volume on words, whether you're playing with the volume, is to talk about a favorite meal. So meals are great because you could talk about, okay, the name of the meal, what did it taste like? What does it remind you of? It's really hard. It's very hard to be flat when you're speaking about a meal. Because if I said, oh, my favorite meal was in Italy, it was delicious. I had some pasta, it was great. You wouldn't believe me, first of all, because it sounds, okay, I'm telling you with my words, it's my favorite, but nothing about me is telling you that I actually loved it. So food is great to talk about. So I want someone to unmute and share with me, what was a favorite meal of yours? What does it remind you of? Where were you? It could be a favorite meal, any meal, a favorite meal from childhood, a favorite meal from vacation. But can someone unmute and just share with me? But what I want you to do is emphasize some of those keywords. Play with your volume, change your volume. See if you're using enough energy. Are you using fillers? So let's see. Does anyone want to try it? Just a favorite meal, 1 or 2 sentences.
Well, I can start if you do not mind.
I would love that.
So, yes, my favorite meal is chicken with curry and rice. And it reminds me of family dinners when we have this meal together. And really love the taste, the spice, and the sweetness of curry. When I can, I try to cook this meal and share it with my family.
Oh, I love that. Thank you. Now, we just heard what she did. She said, I really love the taste and the spice, and it makes me think of my family. That was actually, thank you, Alina, for volunteering that. That was very believable because I felt like, she really was thinking about and picturing that meal. She was picturing her family. She was picturing those emotions behind her words. Now, it's easier to do with the meal than it is with your pitch. But when you're pitching, when you're presenting, when you have a presentation at work, depending on what the content is, you want to start to get some emotions behind that, some personality behind that. And here, when you're pitching to investors in the US, when you're pitching to colleagues in the US, team members in the US, that is going to help you connect. That emotion behind words, that enthusiasm and excitement is going to help you connect to the listener. And people really love that. They're going to engage with it. They're going to engage with your facial expression, your body language, and your voice. So they are going to look for those cues to invite them to have that conversation with you. The next thing I want to think about is speed. Now, this is also very cultural. And I know I speak fast. I actually have to think about that sometimes. I grew up in New York City, so this is very cultural for me, not so much in other parts of the US, I'll be honest with you. If you go to the south of the US, if you go to California, it's not so cultural. People speak much slower, which is actually very hard for me. So I have to think about when I speak to a global audience, my speed has to change. But just in the chat, type in, do you prefer a slower or faster style of communication? What's better for you?
I prefer faster.
Okay, so faster, slower. Thank you, whoever unmuted. I heard faster, slower. Okay, so we have a mix here. A little bit slower for some of you, especially in English, a little bit slower. That makes sense because, of course, it's a second language. I feel the same when I am speaking. So I speak Italian as a second language. My grandparents immigrated to New York. They all came over from the south of Italy, which is, the typical immigration from the south of Italy many years ago. But when I go to Italy and visit friends, I have some friends that speak in Italian, and they know with me they have to slow down. I have a founder here right now who speaks very fast Italian, and it's super hard for me to follow him. I can do it, but it's a lot of work, and I don't always get what he says. So again, it's also on us to be conscious of it. How are we speaking? Are we going fast? Are we going slow? And what is it that our listener needs at that moment? Do we need to add some energy in there? Do we need to slow down? Because we are on a global team and everybody has different levels of language. So because it's cultural and stylistic, it could also be contagious. If you're super high energy, maybe the people in the room will be high energy. If you slow down and you want it to be intentional, obviously, maybe through parts of the presentation that are more serious, you might slow down, you might drop your volume. You want to just get people engaged in the beginning when you first introduce yourself. So you want to, again, play with speed. So we're thinking of, and just to recap, we're thinking of how you use your volume. And now all of this builds on each other. How you use volume for energy, to create energy, to make people feel relaxed. How you emphasize words. How you vary the pitch and the volume to keep people engaged. How you vary your speed to keep people engaged, and also to take the listener into account. What does that listener need from you? And because you're all pitching or presenting, or you might be working on global teams right now, you want to think about who are you speaking to and how can you reach them the best? And again, cultures are going to change from culture to culture, but what can we give people to help them relate, to help people connect? Going back to the pause, it's something that will be your best friend when you are presenting. If you try to speak on a long sentence, what's going to happen? You're talking and talking and talking. Hi, my name is Lisa. I work with global founders. You run out of air very fast. So you're talking and talking and talking. And you have to be conscious of taking a little sip of air in between thoughts. Again, you're going to use it to replace fillers, but you want to break up that language so you don't run out of air by the end of your presentation, of your sentence. What happens if you're running out of air? Remember what we talked about before? Hi, my name is Lisa, and I'm the founder of C3 Speech. Because I might not have any more air left at that point. So I might be dropping because I'm saying a sentence too long. I might be dropping because I don't have enough air. I might be dropping because I want to drop in pitch, but it's too much. So we want to get a sense of, are we breathing? Are we taking in a little bit of air? Are we breaking things up into thoughts? So come on. Nope. Here. This is actually a really good tool. And again, this is something that regardless of, how long you've been speaking the language, when you break ideas up, and I think this goes for many different languages, when you break ideas up, when you basically break things up into thoughts, and what I usually tell people is actually write out your pitch and actually put some lines in your pitch where you're going to take a sip of air, where you're going to emphasize. Act like it's a script in the beginning. Now, I'm not saying you have to be scripted, but it's really good for you to get to know, where do I break up the language? Chunking language up to pace yourself, giving the audience a chance to absorb information. So thinking about where you're breaking up that information, how you're breaking up information, and how you're delivering it is going to impact the whole message. If you go through that whole sentence, that whole long sentence without taking these little pause breaks, the audience themselves are going to lose you. You want the audience to look, especially if it's a new audience. If this is new information for your audience, you want them to have a moment to absorb the information. You want to give yourself a chance to take a breath, a tiny sip of air, and you want to give yourself a moment to pause. It could also change the meaning. Going back to this, if you decide where you want to break up the language, it actually changes up the meaning a little bit. Where you pace, where you pause can influence what people hear. Now, going back to online versus offline. Okay, we're okay. Going back to online versus offline, This is very important when you're thinking about facial expressions, body language. It's very important when you're thinking about how engaged you are, because when you are online, you don't have those cues. So I just want to ask you, what has been your experience online versus offline? Has it been easier? Has it been more difficult? You could actually type in the chat, but now that we're constantly online, what do you prefer? What do you miss about being online or actually offline? And do you feel like it's a different presentation style? You can type it if you want, if you don't want me to hear your voice, which I do wish I could hear. Do you prefer on or offline? Online?
Hi, my name is Kostya. I'm sorry. Yeah. Actually, this is my first experience in offline, actually, and or online, I mean.
Yeah.
And yeah, pretty weird for me. So right now, I think I much prefer offline.
Okay, tell me why.
I don't know. Really hard to concentrate on even on you. Sorry, Lisa. Yeah, for me, I mean, keep my attention on you. I mean, when you do it offline, even in any class or anywhere, much easier. Sometimes now I catch myself that oops, I missed something. I mean, not easy actually online for me.
Okay, no, I think this is great feedback. So for you, it's much easier offline. Now we had some others. Thank you for that. And thank you for unmuting. I appreciate that. Okay, so we have, I prefer offline. Oleg actually prefers online. Anna, I believe it's different, more difficult to keep to keep attention online. And I believe that too, because you're not engaging. So again, because we don't have those cues, getting people to interact when you're online is important, but also really understanding how you present is very important. How can we keep people's attention? How can we get people talking and participating? How are we using our voice? How are we using the words so that we don't lose our audience? And because unfortunately, this is a way that you are going to be interacting quite a bit. I mean, this is fortunately or unfortunately, this is the world we live in. I'm feeling very fortunate because I get to talk to all of you. Many of you are in Russia right now, and I'm sitting here in New York City, and I get to meet you. So I get to meet you, I get to see your face, I get to talk to you. And that's something that even 2 years ago, this was like more of a thing, right? We would get on Zoom or on video and we would think, oh, okay, we're having an online conference and we're going to do this. Now we do it, as an everyday part of our lives. So it has changed quite a bit. It has become different. And our engagement style is going to have to change with that. So we want to make sure we're engaging the people who are online. As we just all said, it is easier for us to engage offline. So think about when you're presenting to your global team, when you're working with, let's say, a startup. Startups are very, very tech savvy, but they tend to be very much all over the world. A lot of the startups that we talk to don't even have an office. They are completely online and, they're virtual, but they, some of them are sitting in Latin America, some of them are sitting in Spain, and some of them are sitting in the US. And this is how they connect all day long. So how are you going to use this medium to the best of your ability? And then also, how are you going to, present at your best to our lives and use these techniques for yourself? I want to just touch on this. This is a little bit about something we all experience, no matter what language we're speaking. It's speakers' nerves, like just getting a little nervous before we present. Who experiences some of this? Does anyone experience a little nerves before you speak? A lot of nerves before you speak? Does anyone feel like this is something that comes up for them? Yes, no. Whoops, nervous or no? Give me a yes or a no. See, no? So I could tell you right now, here we go. In the last 5 years, no, great. Actually, that's very good. So maybe before the last 5 years, it was yes. Is that right? Okay. Yes, yes. Evgeny said yes. Anna said yes. Yes, for sure. Okay. So this is something we all experience. I think the most seasoned speakers, very few people say absolutely no. Some people will say, depending on the stakes, depending on the presentation, but it's something we want to think about. So how do you then make sure, first of all, why does it happen? Well, what happens to us all is that our body, our nervous system goes into fight or flight. It's called the sympathetic nervous system. And it's basically that old part of the brain that basically is trying to protect you. So what it does is it makes your heart race. It makes you speak faster, makes you a little sweaty. It makes you feel, like you can't speak. Maybe your mouth gets dry, or maybe you just forget some of the words. Now, what we want to do is trigger something called your parasympathetic nervous system, that relaxed state that you're in when you're presenting. And again, some of the energy is really important to use. Now, what a lot of people say is use some of the energy as excitement. If you could say to yourself, you know what, I'm going to use this energy and direct it as excitement, let it come out through my hands, through my facial expressions, through my voice, then you can direct it out of you. If you're not moving, it's actually not moving out of you either. So getting some of that energy out is important. Another few techniques just to relax yourself before you present. There's a few types of breathing. So we want to actually slow down the system. If we're feeling a little nervous before we have to go on, and it's a little easier when we're online like this, because we know, okay, so, we could just take a few breaths before we present and turn on our cameras. When you're live, maybe you could go to the corner of the room or to the bathroom and do it. But the first one is a 4-7-8 breath. Now, what we want to do is stimulate something called the vagus nerve. This is something you could Google. It's actually, there's a lot of information on this. It's actually pretty interesting, on how to calm the body down. It gets stimulated during meditation. It gets stimulated during breathing activities. So what it's meant to do is calm the body down. It's a nerve that comes out of the brain, but it also goes through the larynx. It goes through other parts of the body, and it helps to ground your body. So 4-7-8 breathing, breathe in for 4, hold for 7, and then slowly let out on 8. Breathe in for 4, hold for 7, and really just slow let out on 8. And what you're doing is slowing down the system. Now, the next one's a little easier because there's no counting involved. You're just going to do a quick inhale, and you're going to exhale on S. I actually really like this one because this works for me. But you're going to breathe in, and then and that slow S keeps you from going like this. It keeps you from just dumping out all the air, which is something we want to be careful of. So we want to just slow down our system. We want to try to calm things down before we present so that we don't feel that stress. I'm not saying it'll take it away, but it's just tricking the body into saying, hey, everything's fine. We're going to present now, but you don't need to be this, you don't need to feel all these sensations. The next thing you could do is list all the times you've done a great presentation or an okay presentation. But sometimes, you had a great call. You presented really well in front of a group. You presented really well at a meeting. Think of those times in this past year, the past 6 months, and actually create your own little list. So instead of me saying to you, you're going to be great, you say to yourself, you know what? I've done this before. I'm going to do it again. And the more you do it, the more you get yourself out there, the more you present, whether it's virtually or offline. And I guess Costa or Konstantin could say this because he said in the last 5 years, he's gotten better at it. Can you tell us why the last 5 years have gotten better, just out of curiosity? Have you practiced more, or you just felt more comfortable or confident? What was it?
Yeah, just more confident. I became, yeah.
Were you doing it more often?
Actually, not. No, I did it more often before, but I don't know. Yeah, one day I just decided, I can't lose anything, anytime. So it's just in mind, changing the mind.
Okay.
And
all right. So he changed. You changed the mindset.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this goes back to thinking about your own mindset. What story you tell yourself. If you say to yourself, I'm not that good at public speaking, I don't love it, it's just not my favorite thing to do, that's the story you're going to believe. They always say, and this is what I've learned as well, like the stories you tell yourself are the things that actually play out. So being careful of what you say to yourself before you go on is something that you want to be careful of. Making sure that you're relaxing the body is also something that you want to be careful of. Now, going back to culture, we talked a little bit about how your communication style, your voice, and your body language affect how you present. Is there anything that you could think of, any differences that you've seen on your global teams that you want to share with us? Are there differences on your global teams or when you present to different groups, or maybe when you watch different groups present, that you've noticed as the difference or a similarity, that it just pretty much feels the same across the team? How does it affect you personally? You can put it in the chat too. Do you notice people talk faster, slower? Do you have any, did you notice any differences in body language, facial expressions? I can tell you that for our founders and for a lot of the people I've coached, this varies greatly. Obviously, it's personal style, how we tell a story, how we engage, but it's also cultural style. What people are comfortable with, how much body language you're comfortable with. Is it really natural to you to use a lot of facial expression, a lot of movement, or is it much more natural to you to not use any? And depending on what culture you come from, how comfortable will you be when you're doing this? How much practice is it going to take if you're doing it with a new culture? If you're trying to connect with a new audience, maybe where you're selling, maybe where you're trying to get a new clientele, maybe where you're pitching to investors. So this is something that does come into play, and we want to make sure that you understand how it affects you. So going back to what I was saying before, the volume, the tone of responses, your eye contact, how you use eye contact changes from culture to culture. I was actually working with a Russian investor, and we were having a casual conversation. We met in person. He was here over the summer, and interestingly, he kept looking away. I was, I was leaning in, making more direct eye contact. And for him, he would look away sometimes. And he wasn't a lot older. I mean, probably he was in his early 40s. But for him, that constant direct eye contact was, for him, it felt a little rude. So he averted eye contact sometimes because he felt that it was more polite to not make such direct eye contact. For other people, it's, again, going back to your personal beliefs, it's more polite to sit there, and you lean in and you nod. So how you're using your body language, your eye contact, your hand gestures, are going to support what you say. So again, you could have this great story, but how are all of these elements affecting it? How are you using volume? How are you speaking very flat? Are you able to vary your pitch? How are you delivering and answering? Are your answers very short? Yes, no, okay. Or are you able to give a little more? Is there a little more emotion behind it? So thinking about those cues, the best thing that you can think about is to align it. Align your voice, your gestures, and your style so they match, so they're believable. So that when you're presenting, that your intention is met and that people understand what you intended. I feel more comfortable with foreigners rather than with Russians. Okay. So, and again, that could be stylistic. I actually feel the same way about Americans. So I actually feel very comfortable working with and presenting to foreigners than sometimes I do with Americans. So, again, it's preference, it's stylistic. It depends on where you're from, what you believe, what industry you're in. It could depend on your personality. Are you an introvert, an extrovert? One thing I will tell you is that if you record yourself and start to understand what you look like on video and see how these things play out when you present, when you pitch, this is how you're going to learn about yourself. You won't be able to understand how you are doing until you start looking. Not everybody loves looking. In fact, a lot of people say, I hate the sound of my voice. I hate looking at myself. This is horrible, but it's the only way you're going to learn. So I'm going to open up the floor to questions, and we have a few minutes. Or if you want to share some of your own experiences with us, if you have questions about School of C as well, I would love to open up the floor to a few questions before we wrap up. So does anyone have questions about what we presented or School of C? And I'm going to actually stop sharing for a moment.
Yes, we have a question from our Facebook group, and I'm going to read it to you.
Sure.
How can we reduce a bad habit when we try to correct English grammar mistakes? Sometimes I feel bad about it. Maybe you have a secret.
Yeah, I mean, that's a hard one because grammar is one of those things that it really needs to be practiced. I think that most people, especially in New York, understand that, as people are speaking a second language, they understand that there is going to be small mistakes. Again, I go back to Italian. I make a ton of grammar mistakes when I'm speaking in Italian because there's so many tenses that don't exist in English. So I think people are more patient than you think. You shouldn't feel bad because you're actually speaking in two languages. So you have the fact that you're trying to speak and you have two languages should actually make you very proud of yourself, because a lot of people only speak one, especially in the States. So the fact that you're speaking two is incredible. But, again, it's practice. I would say as much as you can, reading. Sometimes it's as simple as reading to understand new vocabulary, reading to understand new grammatical structures, and then also repeating it back to someone or giving it back to someone. Okay, so this is what I just read. This is, oh, you know what? I found this really interesting. And using some of the structures or the new vocabulary incorporated into what you're saying. One of the things that is tough for some founders, or is tough for some executives or people who present in a second language, is they have one set of vocabulary that they use. And when they forget a word, it's really hard to recover from it because you don't necessarily have all those words that you would in your native language. So looking at the words that you're going to use over and over again, or even learning multiple ways of practicing multiple ways of presenting something, present an idea. So here's something you could do, present an idea, or even talk about, let's say, okay, I read this really interesting article and this is what it was about. And then maybe say it in a different way, rephrase it. Try and practice saying it in a few different ways so that you can become more flexible with the language and the vocabulary you're using. It's not a cure because it still takes a lot of practice, especially with grammar. Grammar is a tough one because there's so many rules to it. Speaking is much more about muscle memory. Speaking and working on clarity is much more about getting the muscles used to. It's like running. When you're going for a run or you're learning how to run, the New York Marathon was just happened 2 weeks ago. So I'm sure that the people in the New York Marathon did not read a book about running or read, or watch a movie about running. They ran. That's the only way they could learn. They had to train that muscle memory. They had to develop new patterns and new behaviors. So becoming very aware of that through voice and speaking is one way. Through grammar, it's going to be practice and listening. I think listening to structures is another way you can, once you tune in, is another way you can learn. I sometimes will listen to podcasts and actually stop the podcast and repeat chunks of phrases and things like that if I need to, get a phrase down or understand a different grammatical structure. So that's something I do personally when I learn. All right, anyone else? I hope that answered it for you.
So guys, please raise your hand in Zoom and write the questions in the comment section if you're on Facebook or YouTube. And we have one more question. Can you give to founders some recommendations referring to how to achieve high performance, how to work with the team, how to inspire them to new results?
So a lot of that is leadership communication. That's a great question. And it's a long question to answer, but it is about leadership. It's about, I heard a very interesting quote the other day, and it was about leadership. And they said, real leaders, you don't manage people, you manage workflow. And what you do is lead people, you inspire people. So it's two very different things. When people feel like they're being micromanaged, obviously it's going to be harder for them to express who they are. So, there's a whole big push right now for something called psychological safety. People on a team feeling safe enough to express themselves without thinking that there's going to be, a problem every time they open their mouth, or maybe if they sound like they don't know something and they want to ask a question. Obviously, if it goes to an extreme and they're always asking questions, or they don't know, what it is they need to do for their work, that's different. But I think in order to inspire people, you have to think about bringing out the best in them, looking at their talents and seeing if you could work with those talents. If someone's more expressive, then maybe that could be your person to, to do some of those tasks, your salesperson, your person who's great at storytelling, the person who's representing, or, the face of the brand. Whereas if you have people who are really process oriented, or, really much more about data and numbers, you recognize their talents as well. It takes sometimes a lot for people to change a style. And the thing is, most people are not going to change their style. They can flex the style, they can do something like what Konstantin said. And, one day they just wake up and say, hey, you know what, I feel more confident now in a place in my life where I can do that. But that's not everybody. So having, those expectations and developing the strengths of the person, as well as teaching them new skills, is something I think that helps most global teams. Because they feel like they're heard, they want to feel like they're heard, and they want to feel like they're learning. And they do say that people often don't leave jobs because of money, they leave because of bosses. So, how are you inspiring your team through communication is going to be very important. All right, I hope that answered that question as well. And again, that one we could probably have a whole 3-day workshop on, because that's a whole leadership, how teams interact. But that was a little tiny bit of, what might be an answer for that one. Is there any other questions before we wrap up? Okay.
I would
All
like
right.
to ask you,
Yes.
what is the best way to improve presentation and pronunciation skills for entrepreneurs, because they have little time and they want to get results very quickly?
I mean, again, results very quickly is a tough one.
What is the most efficient way to improve presentation and pronunciation skills for entrepreneurs?
Yes. So, I mean, I think that there's a couple things. First, going back to that slide that we talked about, how, if you're talking about pronunciation in English, you want to think about a few things. The tone and the music actually matters. It's about 50% of the language. So you could have clear presentation, but be very, very flat, and you could still have a disconnect. When you're practicing actual pronunciation, it goes back to what I just said. It's muscle memory. So how are you pronouncing the vowels? The vowels are really important. Are you saying them fully? Those A's and O's, in Russian, they're going to get cut off. I mean, O in Russian is much more flat. It's O, so A is going to be A, it's half of the sound pretty much. So can you say it fully, first of all? And are you opening your mouth to actually shape the sound? So, if you're not someone who likes to actually move their mouth, you're going to have to practice this, over exaggerate it as you're practicing and presenting, over exaggerate how it feels, not to the point where you don't understand yourself, not where you're going so slow, but over exaggerate, make it crisp, pronounce the endings, make sure that you identify all the keywords that you say all the time, the industry vocabulary, make a list and make sure that's clear. Get feedback from people. You could also record and listen. You could have other people give you feedback. You could ask people who, well, if you have access to native speakers, you could ask, okay, I'm going to do a presentation right now. Could you just give me some feedback? But you can also, again, listen to as much as you can and then speak. Try to imitate people. Try to imitate a couple lines off of a podcast or a show. Pause it, try to repeat it. These are little tricks. There's no fast way. I mean, I'll be honest, it's a tough thing because it does take a little while, but as you practice, the more you do it, the more you speak, the better you'll get. The more you understand how the sounds are made, the better you'll get. So those are the types of things, if you could bring it together, the music of the language, the better you're going to get. And the presentation skills is all the things we talked about, how you're using volume, tone, body language, facial expression. Those are all going to give you that, that style in the front of the room, that gravitas, that, that presence that you're looking for. All right. I do have to wrap up in a few moments. So I could take one last question if anybody has one. All right. All right. So we are going to wrap up there. Thank you very much. Thank you everybody for participating. Thank you, Constantine, for that. I appreciate that. And for those of you who were brave enough to unmute, I really appreciate that. It always keeps things a little more fun and interactive. But for all of you, I hope that you got some value from this and that you learned about School of C. And, I really encourage you to, take a look at the school, see how how it works and see if it's a good fit for you. Again, you have access to many different mentors, just like me, and I'll get to meet you hopefully in the future. So I think from here, we're going to finish up. To any of you from School of C? Yeah. Oh, okay.
One more question. Yes. Can you tell us about one of the graduates of the previous class? Maybe Anastasia, but about her attraction.
Well, so one of the graduates from the previous class is actually in the accelerator right now, and she's here in New York, and she is gaining great traction. So she, came with a concept, and now she's developing. So she had some great traction in Russia. She developed a tool called In Mind, and it is actually a learning platform. And she is now connecting with investors and working with people here in the US. This is her second phase. So she's doing that. And she's doing this, and it's very important for her I have to wrap up in a moment. It's very important for her to continue her journey. So again, understanding how to launch in this market, being here has been very valuable for her because she's made those connections.
Okay, thank you. And one more, how to deal with being shy? Practice more?
Look, shy is a personality trait. If you're an introvert, then you have to honor that. Now, that doesn't mean you're never going to present, but you want to put yourself in situations where it's a hard thing, because you are going to be probably more uncomfortable than an extrovert when you speak, when you're speaking in front of a group, especially. Now, I think practice is very important, but also, understanding what tools you need in order to make you a little more comfortable. Do you need to calm down a little? What when you present? Again, is it coming back to voice? Is your shyness showing through your voice? Do you need to use a bolder voice for more volume, to compensate for some of that pullback? Do you have to think about, what you're saying and how you're connecting? And, I think in your case, whoever asked that question, it is starting in a smaller group and then seeing how you could use your skills to practice out. There's a lot of actors. There's a lot of famous people who are very shy in person, but their skills on the stage are amazing. But when you get them alone, they're much more shy. So there are ways to get over this. Practice is one of them. Exposure is another. The more you expose yourself to these types of situations, the less you're going to feel that shyness. And again, this is one. There is a book. There's a book out there. It's called Quiet. It is one that I've been meaning to read, but it is supposed to be amazing. Let me just see who the author is. Quite. Yeah, it's called Quiet, and it is Quiet, The Power of Introverts in a World That Can't Stop Talking. And it's been recommended to me. The author is Susan Cain. So SUSANCAIN. I believe that book has a lot of great information for people who are introverts. All right, I do actually have to wrap up because I have some other meetings that I have to attend, but again, thank you very much for attending. All right, thank you, everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, bye-bye.
Thank you. Next week, we will see each other at the presentation of our program with Artem Gladkih, the CEO at Signum AI. So it will be very interesting. I hope you'll enjoy this meeting. Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.